Hi everybody, welcome to Room and Board. My name's Chris George, and today is another Monday morning. So you know what that means. Sunday was yesterday, and Tuesday is tomorrow. I have unfortunate news. We've reached our joke quota for the year. It's only mid-May, but we got there. So get ready for a video filled with sadness and despair. Bottle those tears and pull them out when you feel a hint of joy as a reminder that there is no joy allowed here whatsoever. And in unrelated news, I lost Rising Sun last night. But that aside, this is Crowdfunding Countdown, where we take a look at every single board game campaign finishing up this week, or almost every single one, because now I cut the ones that are really bad that it just feels mean to pick on. But before we get into that, shout out to my new patrons this week. Thank you to Mom and Dad. Oh, and Mom and Dad. What cool names are they? I can't believe we got two of the same. Is that Swedish? I think it's Swedish. So if you're waiting to become a patron so you could have a shout out all to yourself, well, you really screwed up because this was the week. Actually, you did miss out on some incredible voting on the deathmatch that happened over in our Discord this past week. It was very good. I'm very excited to make the video, just so I can relive the fervor that happened. I have such a friggin' great time over there. I really do. So thank you all. You all rock. You help make this channel what it is. Mediocre at best. All right, let's try to find some light at the beginning of this tunnel, and let's get into the games. And first up we have Damask. Get your little spider butts ready. It's time to weave some silk into the most beautiful patterns the world has ever seen. And the basic premise of the game is you're going to take these silk cubes from this big wheel of silk, and you are going to put them on your patterns to complete them. Your patterns will require 3 blue and 2 black. That's the example that they give. And they're really trying to be the next Azul here. Even the breakdown of the rulebook and the structure of it just visually smacks of Azul, and that's not a bad thing. Azul's a great game. And it's very simple. On your turn, you have 2 choices. You can take a Damask, a pattern, or you can take cubes from a wheel. And so you go around this wheel taking cubes, and you stop once you've taken your second cube of the same color. And then you can choose to take cubes from somebody else's overstock, and they get a little favor, a little bonus. Or you can mount one of your completed Damasks, which basically scores you points. You get money, money's points at the end of the game, that's it. And what I really love about this campaign page is that the how to play section is just so simple until you read the fine print, which contradicts every graphic that they put on the side. Great job, Damask. Way to make a how to play section that makes it more confusing as to how to play than if you just left it blank. This is not helpful to people learning, and it makes people abandon your game. They say, hey, you can take cubes from the wheel, and you have to stop when you take 2 of the same color. And then they show someone taking 3 of the same color, and then 2 more of a different color. And I assumed maybe it only applied to the cubes that go into your overstock, because you can take the cubes and you can put them directly on a pattern. I thought maybe that's a mechanic. If it can go right on a pattern, you just get to keep on spinning round and round. But I looked through the rulebook and I didn't see any mention of that. So I'm just assuming it's a poor example that has confused me and made me not interested in your game whatsoever. And I believe it's the second one, because you look at the rulebook and they show you examples there, and in those examples they cover up the exact portion of the wheel that they're talking about. There's these 2 ornate spokes on the wheel, and whenever you pass those, something else happens at the end of the round. And in the example, they cover one of them up with the stick, the pointing stick's covering it. So you say, oh, there's 2 ornate things. I only see one. I mean, it's across from the other one, so you assume that it's there, but like, what are these examples, Damask? Those are just rulebook issues, though. So if you look past that and you look at the actual game, it's not a bad price. £27 or $43 Canadian. That's an okay deal for what you're getting components-wise in this sort of light game, 15 minutes per player. And shipping to the US and the UK is okay. It's like $10. Shipping to Canada is $20, so it makes this a $63 purchase for me, and that is just too much for what I want to pay. I'd want this to be around the same price as Azul, maybe even a little bit less, because I think the pieces in Azul are such good quality. Around that sort of $30 to $35 mark is where I'd want to see this. So 63 is too rich for my blood, as most things are. But if you're interested, that finishes up on Gamefound Wednesday the 25th at 3:30 a.m. Now, next up, again on Gamefound, we have Desperation, and I'm not really sure if this is an RPG or it is like a standard tabletop game, but there's enough intersection that I wanted to mention it briefly. They say it is survival horror without the survival, which I think is a great joke. It really is. And the reason I'm confused, there's no real rule book available, or not one that I saw, but it says it runs on this Desperation engine. And so the basic premise of this game is, instead of deciding what the characters do in the game, there is sort of a set script that's going to happen. Decisions will occur, things will be said, and you choose which character is the one who's saying these things, and that will have ramifications on the town as you progress through this deck of cards. And so they frame it as the sense of dread is palpable as you trundle on towards unescapable horror. And I think there's something really interesting about that idea, that every time you play, you know the outcome, and you're just subjecting yourself to these horrible, horrible things, which, now that I say it, maybe it suits the theme of, sadness and despair for this video, but I don't know if it's something that I would want to continually experience. But if you're into that sort of gothic vibe, then you may want to check this one out. That finishes up Wednesday at 3 p.m. Now, next up, we have Raw. And this is a campaign that I am stoked for. And also will absolutely not be backing, because it's going to be widely available. It's a reprint of a very well-known designer, Reiner Knizia, in a very well-known design that will be available at your local stores. So for me, I could pay $50 Canadian plus $20 shipping to get it to my door, or I could wait and get this same version for $47 Canadian at my local store. I know which one that I'm doing. But Raw is an auction game. It is just auctioning. If you love the mechanic of auctioning, then you should absolutely check this one out. I'd say it's on par, in esteem, at least in my brain, with Tigris and Euphrates, which is Reiner Knizia's other currently out of print great game. Although Tigris and Euphrates is sitting at 98 on Board Game Geek, Raw is currently sitting at 197 on Board Game Geek. Still, both are pretty high up there. And if you've been in this hobby for a little bit, you probably know the name Reiner Knizia. And when I mentioned this to my neighbor, she said, "Oh yeah, I remember playing that one. It's just the one where you shout Raw all the time." And I thought, no, that can't possibly be true. But it is true. A bunch of tiles will come up in the middle, and then on your turn you can choose to either draw a new tile or invoke Raw. And you just say, Raw! You take the little Raw statue, and then an auction starts. And people will bid using their little sundial discs. You'll have 3 sundials, they'll all have different numbers on them. Everybody only gets to bid once, finishing with the person who invoked Raw. So they'll obviously have a chance to bid higher if they have the higher sundials. And when that happens, they take all the tiles in the middle and take their sundial and put it back onto the auction board and take another sundial that's up on the auction board. And then so the next person who wins an auction not only will be able to take the other tiles that happen in the middle, but they'll be able to exchange possibly their low tile for a potentially really good tile used for bidding. The sundials range from 1 to 13 or 14, I believe. But I love that you just have to say Raw to invoke Raw. You can draw a tile that invokes Raw as well as you're pulling a tile from the bag, and that just starts an auction whether you like it or not. Or you can invoke Raw. Although they have changed it in this deluxe version, they've made it so you actually have to sing the song to invoke Raw. You know, it's because they partnered with the famous singer Lady Gaga. Rah, rah, auction now, get tiles, make them march. So dumb. But that's basically the game. Pull more tiles, or choose to invoke Raw and auction them off. And then all these tiles, you want to make different sets, they're all worth points. Or if you've collected god tiles, you can swap these god tiles to just take a tile from the auction area as well, which is cool, which makes those things valuable, gives you a little bit of push and pull, and lets you be selective if there are disaster tiles up in the line as well, because there are negative tiles which force you to lose things that you've grabbed. We already talked about the price. That price is for the base game. It's double that. It's $80 US for the deluxe version, and the only thing different between the deluxe version is instead of cardboard tiles, you get wooden tiles, and instead of cardboard point markers, you get metal point markers. So if you like that stuff, go for it. For me, it's not worth paying double the amount that I would have to in order to get this sort of extra wood and metal, but you know, I'm cheap and sensible. More sensible than all of you. Although to be fair, I suppose a case could be made that since you are drawing tiles from a bag, they are going to have more wear and tear on them. So having them as wood instead of cardboard wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I admit. But for me, it's not enough to make me go to that extra price point. But the game looks fun. I like auctioning in a game, and this is just auctioning. And I like that the base game is on the cheaper side as well. So if you're interested in that, again, that's over on Gamefound, finishing Wednesday as well at 11 p.m. And that's it for Gamefound. We're on to Kickstarter. That's just how it worked out this week. No more Gamefound finishing up, or at least none that I saw. And so we move on to the masterpiece that Reiner Knizia wished he designed. And that's, of course, Grab Your Breakfast. And this is a game that actually has a matching mechanic. If you watched the beginning of the ranking and defining board game mechanics video that I put out, I think on Friday, you will know that I put matching as, I think, number 147, way down at the bottom of 150 different mechanics that we are defining and ranking. And at that time I said, I can't think of a game that uses matching in an interesting way, and this actually might be that game. This is the way of using matching to make it not the worst part in the world. You'll have 2 cards in your hand, there'll be a grid of cards, and you can take a card as long as you have a card in your hand that relates to it. So you're matching it, and then you get to take it and put it into your set. And you have to collect 2 toast so that they're worth anything, because you have to have 2 slices of toast and not 1, because you're not an idiot. You're serving breakfast here, okay? You're not going on a peasant march. Throw some jam on there if you want some extra points. And then when you feel like you've used up that card and taken that card to its full potential, you can discard it and draw a new one. And so it seems okay. I think it is legitimately the best use of a matching mechanic that I have yet to see in a game. That still doesn't necessarily mean that I am particularly interested in it, but it's an okay price point, 17 bucks US. The shipping, however, to anywhere other than Singapore and Malaysia is horrible. So if you live in Singapore and Malaysia and you really love matching, well, I do think this is the creme de la creme. So if you're interested in that, that finishes Thursday, May 26th at 9 a.m. Now, next up, we have All Time Wrestling, the wrestling card game. So if you ever wanted a game about big, sweaty, half-naked, oily men...
What'd you just say? Yucky, yucky, I'm not interested.
Well, that is a surprising turn of events. I thought you would...
How expensive is it?
It's incredibly expensive for what
Okay, shut up and take my little moist money.
Yeah, I have no doubt his money... all of his bills are so moist. This game is really a 1v1 game. And for that 1v1 game, it's not a horrible price. If you want to get the 2v2 game, then it gets into kind of, I think, horrible price territory. It's like 29 bucks US versus $67 US for not a lot more. But the basic premise of the game is you're gonna have a bunch of cards. Someone will be the attacker and someone will be the defender. You're gonna play these cards and they're gonna cost you stamina. Then you roll a dice to see if they hit, and you can continue keeping that momentum up and continue being the attacker, or the defender can play some block cards to turn the tide and not take damage, and then flip it on you and do some other suplexes and Diamond Dallas Page and, what was it, Goldberg? Was that tackle? I remember my brother would often power bomb me into the couch. That's my experience with wrestling. There's also these little symbols in the bottom of the cards that if you connect them with previous cards, you make a combo and it's easier to really slam them into the ground. I mean, hey, it seems okay. And it's true, it is great. You have wrestlers making videos about how excited they are to be in the game. That's definitely not just them reading a script and is on Cameo. You know, sometimes they throw up these cameos and you can tell it's a cameo because of the little cameo watermark in the bottom corner. But this one doesn't have a cameo watermark, so I assume it's completely legitimate and not cameo whatsoever. I think it's also pretty cool how they put that little bar at the bottom there. I'm sure it's not blocking anything important. Anyway, if you're a wrestling fan, you might be interested. I think it's too expensive for what it is, because they're pushing you on that $67 price point if you want more than a 2-player game. Or there's a tier above the 29 US, which is like $50, and you get Macho Man Randy Savage and Andre the Giant. And I'm sure that increase is literally just to pay for the rights to use them in the game. Which is weird, because you'd think the cards would be of Andre the Giant and Macho Man Randy Savage instead of Toru from Jackie Chan and Uncle Larry on his disco night celebrations. Shipping is like 15 to 20 bucks. So even for the 2-player, you're looking at 50 bucks US. For the 4-player, you're looking at 87 bucks. So I don't know. Wrestling fans should check it out. I really do think that they should. I haven't yet seen a wrestling game that particularly draws me in, but maybe it's just because this one has hand management, and apparently I hate that now. It has been written, and so it must be done. Anyway, if you're interested in that, that finishes May 26th at 9:21 a.m. Next up, we have Rivenstone. Move over, Archie. We got a new Rivenstone high school team in town. Even I couldn't commit to that joke. Anyway, this is a new tabletop mini skirmish game. So if you like that genre, it might be worth checking out. It's raised over $250,000 Canadian, so that's how you know that it's really good and it's not just overpriced for what it is. That's how you can tell. And so what's new about this one that distinguishes it from every other tabletop mini skirmish game? Well, as they say in the video, you can build your minis and paint your minis and battle with them. That seems pretty unique. I'm not quite sure why no other minigame has tried that before. It feels like it would be wildly successful. I mean, I'm not the target audience for this one here. I recognize that. Any game that operates on a model of, yeah, you have to buy 1,000,000 minis only for us to release some more later on that are better and creep up the power so that yours are useless and you have to buy more. That sort of thing doesn't interest me. And I tried to give this one the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe it's different. Maybe I should pay at their lowest pledge, the $99, to get one faction and hope that one of the 1,260 backers lives near me so that I have someone to play with. Because their lowest tier, you just get one faction. That's it. You can't even play with anyone if they haven't bought into this very specific new system. But don't worry, every faction comes with their own set of rules and tokens and measuring sticks, because why would you want to bundle those together? No. Let's put them all in every faction box so that everyone has duplicates. That way we can really keep the component cost up and make sure our pledges are higher. Again, I am not the target audience, but with this initial faction, you get 16 minis, so that's a little like $6 a mini, a bit over $6 a mini, and for that price, you should absolutely just go check out Ravage Star instead if you're interested in tabletop minis. I kind of scoffed at them, but seeing more tabletop minis out there, that was a pretty good price, and the sculpts are so much better than this. So if you like the genre, well, you already know that I'm a dumb idiot, and your opinion is better than mine. But check it out if you want. That finishes May 26th at 2:55 p.m. Now, next up we have not a board game, but something definitely worth mentioning because it has raised over $1.8 million Canadian. And thankfully it's not a board game, which is why we didn't get a 5 Reasons You Shouldn't back, but it is the Blade Runner RPG. And personally, I've never been crazy about Blade Runner. I know people who love the world and who love the system. I never saw the second movie. I mean, I've heard the first one is better, and I wasn't all that crazy about that. But I do like the world. I recognize that this is a cool world with a lot of lore into it, and it might be a world where you want to explore. Blade Runner's a vibe, right? And that's kind of what you want in your RPGs. You want a vibe, you want a world which can be developed further and you can immerse yourself in. And so this one, it's $39 Canadian for a print and play of like the core rules and the core stuff, and honestly seems kind of fun, especially because they put it in this sort of case-solving slant. Although when you really think about it, a lot of RPGs, even if they don't have a solve a mystery aspect of it, they're kind of about solving a mystery or learning about something, right? You enter this world, something's happening that you don't know about, and you have to figure out what's going on and deal with it. That's the arc of any RPG, but having it as specific mysteries that you have to solve, I think is a good call, and potentially why people are resonating with it. So like I said, it's $39 Canadian for a print and play, or it's $65 Canadian for a physical copy. If you're interested in this, I'm sure you've already learned about it and have checked it out. But if not, well, now you know. And that finishes May 26th at 3 p.m. But there also may be a better murder-solving mystery RPG that's coming up later on the list that I can barely contain my excitement about. There is. We'll get there. Now, next up, we have Tiny Epic Vikings. And even with not being the biggest fan of Tiny Epic Quest, that's the only other Tiny Epic game that I've played, I'm still pretty intrigued by Tiny Epic Vikings. You know, it's just something about them, you know, their big burly frames, their big bushy beards, the way the oil kind of goes.
Did you say oil? I love it when
I've got to stop framing
me.
things that way. It's $25.
Oh, yucky, peasants. I need the RPG.
Gotta get them out of here. Anyway, this is Blood Rage mixed with Lords of Hellas in a very teeny tiny box. At least mechanically. And it looks pretty neat. Each era You'll draft Vikings one at a time, pass your cards, standard draft, and then you'll play them one at a time and do their action. And so each Viking will be associated with a specific type of rune. And the more runes you have and build up over the course of the game, the more special abilities of these Vikings that you can activate. And so you get runes from your Vikings, and you also get runes from gaining control over the map as well. By adding little figures to a province, you control that province, you control the power of the rune that resides within it. Different from the power of the moon, which objectively might be better. But then for scoring, and this is my favorite part, this is what really draws me in, whichever god has the most favor, because each god is associated with a different rune, and every time you fight battles, you're fighting over favor cards that have their rune associated with them, and so the more you interact with that specific god's rune, the higher their sort of favor track goes up, and eventually there will be one god to rule them all, and that is the god that scores the most points for the runes of that specific type that you have. And then the other gods, you know, they score less points, but there's a way to kind of really streamline your strategy towards getting these runes that are going to be worth the most, or potentially, I don't know, I hope potentially, you can just really push the other one up and be fighting over the different gods and which runes are going to come out on top and be worth the most points. So it looks cool. And they do a really good job of upselling you here. They say, yeah, 25 bucks for the retail game, or $5 more, 30 bucks. You get some extra shamans, or just $10 more. You get this extra little Ragnarok expansion with some ice giants. We know you want little Meeple ice giants. But honestly, even at that $40 level, it's not a bad price for what you get. The $15 shipping is tough for me, so even if I were to get the base game, after conversion, it's still like 50 to 60 bucks for me to purchase, whereas, again, every other Tiny Epic game is in a store right now, close to me, for 30 bucks. So I feel like this one will be available later on. But I also can say, having looked into a few Tiny Epics, I'm only playing Quest, but looked into a few of them, this feels like the one that I am the most interested out of the bunch. They do a really cool job, I think, with getting a lot of game into a very small box, and mechanically, I think it looks sound. So if you're interested, check that out. That's Thursday, May 26th at 5 p.m. Now, next up, we have a game called Through Ice and Snow, and this is by Two Tomatoes Games, and I am fairly fond of Two Tomatoes Games because I reviewed their last Kickstarter, Peak Oil Profiteer, a ways back, and I really enjoyed it, and my memory of that enjoyment only continues to build every time I think about it, and every time I think about getting a copy. I'm actively excited. I don't know, at least once a month I'll think about it and go, oh yeah, I can't wait for that to get here so that I can play it in person. So knowing that, I'm already fairly excited about the company, and I think that they produce good stuff, and I know that the value of the stretch goals that they added in at a pretty low price for Peak Oil was exciting. That was a good campaign. So I'm excited for this one just based off of that and my own personal experience with the company. But this rulebook also gets me excited because it includes one of the most succinct explanations of the purpose of the game that I've seen, and especially better than anything that's on their campaign page. So if you're interested in this game, I definitely just click on the rulebook and read that first little passage, and I feel like it'll give you a good sense. Or don't read the passage. I'll just read it for you now quickly because it's short and they phrase it very well. In this game, you play as admirals of a 19th century Arctic expedition. This expedition consists of several ships, and each player is in command of one of them. Your common goal is for the expedition to conquer the Northwest Passage, and throughout your journey, you will take the actions that increase your reputation, which is measured in prestige points. Once the voyage is complete, whoever has the most prestige points wins. Easy. That's the overview, and it looks really fun. Even the first player determination makes me happy, because it's whichever character has the most dynamite, so it has a gameplay implication, which makes sense. And then if there's a tie, well then it's just the person who's seated the furthest north, which I also just think is fun. So there are three sort of phases to the game, as a lot of games go. There's the navigation phase, where you'll move the fleet of ships. There's the action phase, where it's the worker placement phase. You'll take your workers and you'll put them on a board and claim those actions. And then there's the boarding phase, which is the upkeep phase. You just have to feed your workers and make sure the morale stays up and nobody dies in the harsh tundra of the Northwest Passage. So the way you travel through the map is a bit like Mario Party 9, which was the worst Mario Party for this specific reason of how you travel. But you're all traveling in one fleet. And so the fleet moves as one. You're all in that sort of area, but there'll be one fleet leader. And that's the person who has to spend the dynamite to basically blow up passages and make your way through chunks of ice. And so you're going to explore further and further, and the game will end once you've made your way through. And then when you get to a destination and you've stopped that sort of movement aspect of it, everybody gets to take the destination phase, which is where you place your workers on the main board. And so you have 3 specific officers who can help with bonus actions, 3 ordinary sailors who you hope don't die. And you can also hire an Inuk guide, that's the singular term for Inuit, to add to your team. And when you do, they're friggin' awesome because they know the North. They're like, okay, everything you're doing is wrong. Let me show you how it's really done. But what's interesting about this shared navigation aspect of it is that everyone loses fuel. So if you've taken on the role as leader and you're blowing up the dynamite, everybody else is losing this fuel in order to keep up with the fleet, because you have to keep up with the fleet. But you have to spend your dynamite to choose the navigation areas. However, if everybody doesn't have dynamite, you all lose. You're all lost to the North forever. It's an interesting choice of who gets to be the leader. Those decisions of the pathways that you get to choose seem fun. I like that when you get to a spot, you're going to be running around with sled dogs and upgrading your ship and building little cabins in the places you visited. Basically just establishing your presence in the North the best. And I think this looks cool. It is more expensive than I was hoping for. I think I was spoiled with the price point on Peak Oil. So it's €50 or $68 Canadian for the base version. And after shipping probably brings it around to like $85 Canadian for me. But they also are subsidizing the shipping, but only if you pledge on Kickstarter. So that's their incentive to get you to pledge on Kickstarter and commit to a copy and give 5% of your pledge to Kickstarter. So I'm really not sure if the €5 to €10 subsidy is already applied on their shipping table or not. I feel like it isn't, but I'm not sure. That's something you'd probably want to ask in the comments if you backed. And also it's not clear when they're subsidizing €5 and when they're subsidizing €10. Again, I assume it would be, oh, we'll subsidize €5 for the base game and then €10 for the base game and the expansion. Like, that would make sense, but it might be country dependent. I'm really not sure. It seems odd to have a range and not be clear about that, which also makes it a little bit less clear for me to determine whether or not I'm going to get it. I mean, it's already too expensive for me, honestly. But they do have a bunch of fun add-ons. They've added cards and they've screen printed the meeples, so the extras feel nice. It's still just a little bit too expensive, but I think the core concept looks cool for me. So if you're interested, hey, check it out. That's May 26th at 10 p.m. Next up, move over. Do-re-mi, we've got Imiki, or Hi My Kai, if you're nasty. And this puts itself forward as a game of observation, skill, and strategy. And while the observation wasn't quite what I was expecting, this still actually looks like a really neat game. It's a nice little abstract strategy, 1 versus 1. I think that's the only way you'd want to play it. And each opponent has 3 dice. These are your yokai cubes, different from Yokai Quest, thank goodness. And they're 6-sided dice. You've got 2 fire, 2 water, and 2 wood faces on it. And so on your turn, you're going to push one of your cubes. You're going to tilt it so that it moves 1 space, and the face that was on the side is now face up. And the goal of the game is to get a certain number of points. And you get points by moving your cubes or tilting your cubes next to your opponent's cubes and winning this sort of rock, paper, scissors battle that they have going on. Water extinguishes fire, fire burns wood, wood floats on water. It's like, what up? I'm here. You can't do anything to me, water, but make me a little damp. I mean, this is also different from my deathmatch experiences where fire consumes all, but I'll let it slide for now. And so if you move your dice next to an opponent's dice and you're on top of that rock, paper, scissors battle, you get a point. That's it. And so you're going to be rolling these dice and positioning and moving them around, but I just think the concept of tilting it and having to spatially shift your mind and your position, it feels like a fun little abstract head-to-head battle. Or if you create a situation where there are 4 of the same faces face up between all of your 6 dice, well, you also get a point. And so you only play to a small amount of points, so these games will be quick. And I don't know, this just seems interesting to me. This was a nice surprise, for sure. So it's €35, 48 bucks Canadian, €12 shipping. If you're in Canada, US, UK, if you're in France or the EU, well, then it's 5 to 7 shipping, respectively. So to get to my door, It's 65 bucks. And that's, well, yeah, that's too expensive. But I really do love the concept. So, hey, check it out. That finishes Friday, May 27th at 4:59 a.m. Next up, we have upgrades for Wingspan. Meeple Source is putting out some more birds to bling out your Wingspan copy. And basically all that these birds do is that, if you're familiar with Wingspan, if you're not, just skip on to the next section, I guess, because you don't need these whatsoever. They just replaced the little wooden cubes with little wooden painted birds. So it's 10 to 12 bucks for a set of 8 birds, and that'll basically cover one player. So you'd need to spend 50 to 72 bucks if you wanted to cover every player, or you could just get yourself one copy, one single copy, and then laugh at all the pathetic fools that you've invited over to play Wingspan. Give them their ugly looking cubes. You've got the albatross, baby. You're just, boom, dwarfing everything out. So US shipping, 7 bucks. Anywhere else is $9.15. Are these little meeples worth $17 to you if you live in the US? Maybe if you love Wingspan. I mean, they're pretty cute. They really are cute, but they're so unnecessary. But if Wingspan's your favorite game, hey, maybe you'd want to treat yourself. Anyway, that finishes Friday, May 27th at 3 p.m. if you're interested. Now, next up, we have Thunderstone Quest. And this is a game by AEG. It's been out for a long time, and so this is actually for 2 new expansions for Thunderstone Quest. But you can also get a new version, a revamped version of the starter set with a quest. And Thunderstone Quest follows a similar structure as Final Girl, that you'll have this base set, and then you will implement different quests into your game. You'll play one quest or whatever, and those will give you additional monsters to fight and probably some items and new twists on the game itself. So these quests are essentially expansions. You never need them, but you may want to pick up a couple if you enjoy the system. And if you really enjoy the system, well, then you have like 10 to choose from. And I've heard good things about Thunderstone Quest. It's not something that I've pulled the trigger on before, and looking at this campaign was the first time I really looked into the game, and I'm regretting a bit that I haven't pulled the trigger on it before, because it's deck building with a board, which is something that I really enjoy. And so basically you're gonna have this village board and this dungeon board. And on your turn, you have your little meeple, and you can put them somewhere in the village, and then use your cards and gold to buy new cards to put into your deck and build your deck to get you ready to put your little meeple in the dungeon and move through the dungeon, spending light resource to get to the monster that you want to fight, and then use your cards, not for their gold, but for their sort of battle mechanic, their battle stat, and fight these monsters in the dungeon. But one of my favorite things about this game is that there's one spot in the village where you get to upgrade your character. And so you start as this classless, raceless peasant, and then you go there and you say, oh yeah, I'm going to turn into a dwarf for this run, or I'm going to be an elf for this run, or I'm going to be a wizard for this run. And everyone can go there, and everyone can become one of these different classes. So at the beginning, it's this race of, or I assume it's a race of, who can become a class first that synergizes with the deck that they're building. And I just think that's such a fun concept and adds to that replayability. The ability to choose your character midway through the game feels very fun to me. Like you've gone through your prologue and then you've emerged now as a hero. And then you'll upgrade your same hero over and over again. So I'll be a level 1 dwarf. I can't turn into a level 2 mage because I've already picked like the dwarf path, right? So I like that. I think the different locations feel fun, the village side and the dungeon side as well. I like that you can just move through the dungeon to get to whatever monster you want to, but that has a cost to it, right? You have to pay light. You have to be able to navigate through the dungeon to get there. And so if you haven't upgraded that exploration ability, you are facing more random monsters, which you may not want to do. I think the reveal of the final boss is so slick because apparently it's on the back of this giant rat card. And so there will always be a giant rat to fight in every game. It's your standard kill them as many times as you want, like the Goblin and Clank. You know, there's that one Goblin and Clank that you can murder no matter where you are on the board. And he's just trying to find a place in the dungeon where he can make a home, but it doesn't matter. Wherever he is, the adventurers just happen to be, and they're murdering him over and over and over and just taking his money. And he throws them a coin. He says, please leave me alone. I'm just trying to live my life. And he goes down into the crystal cavern only to meet another adventurer on the other side of the map who just pummels him in the face with their mercenary companions taking his gold again. Oh, that poor goblin. Anyway, there is the standard rat, large rat that you can always fight. And then on the back of that is the final boss. I don't know why I think this is slick. I think it's a good reusing of cards. I think you just shuffle your different rats and you put a random one down. You don't know what the final boss will be. I mean, it doesn't seem that slick. You could just have a card off to the side that's the boss that does the same thing. I just like that it's double-sided and you get the reveal. That's it. What a roundabout way of saying it. So if you are interested, check it out. Roll for Crit has a great learn how to play in 7 minutes that is better than the rulebook. That should hopefully give you a sense of if you'll like this game or not, or hopefully I gave you that sense. Don't watch them, watch me and only me from now until the end of time. Is that too much to ask? Anyway, it's $50 for the starter set, which is the most tempting to me, having never played Thunderstone Quest. Obviously, it's more tempting than spending $55 US for the 2 expansions that I can't play because I don't own a core set. But after conversion, again, with shipping, that number comes to $90 for me, whereas I can get Thunderstone Quest in a store for $70. But it does look cool. I think it looks like a really fun system and one that I'm interested in trying at some point. Anyway, that finishes Friday, May 27th at 8 p.m. Next up, we have Brindlewood Bay. And maybe you can tell by my shift in tone here, this is the RPG that we may have mentioned back in Blade Runner. And I have to say, of all the RPGs that I have seen in my time, this has got to be one of the best ones based on theme alone. When I was watching the video, I always start just playing the video and recording it when I'm looking into these games, and I thought, oh, wow, that voiceover is kind of funny. It kind of sounds a bit like Maggie. I'm sure there's a joke in there, and then the theme emerged. Then they dropped on me that Brindlewood Bay is a combination of Murder, She Wrote and H.P. Lovecraft. Because of course you're going to play a group of elderly women from the Murder Mavens Mystery Book Club, baby. Instantly back. Everyone should go do it. Get your old lady book club together and solve some mysteries in this New England town. And I love this so much. I think this is so good and so funny. And their descriptor's so good. They say, we get to see these women living out their lives and supporting one another and pursuing their favorite hobbies, which are called cozy activities in this game. There's a cozy activity stat. You can do a cozy activity to boost yourself. Just sit down and have a little knit. It's exceptional. It's so good. And if that wasn't enough, here are the titles of the cases that you can solve. Dad Overboard, The Great Brindlewood Bay Bake-Off, All Hallows Scream, Jingle Bell Shock, A Murder Most Mucky, and Exit Stage Death. I mean, come on. How good does this sound? It sounds exceptional. I think it says it uses the Apocalypse system, which I don't know what that means. But their XP system sounds a little similar to this RPG that I played called Mouse Guard, where you have these questions that you write down, or these goals that you write down at the beginning, and if you solve them, or if you obtain them, and usually they're character-driven, then you get like an XP point at the end of the round, at the end of the session. So it's really pro-character development, obviously, because why would you not want to develop these incredible characters from the Murder Mavens Mystery Book Club? I can't. I need to get Zach to look at this campaign for me and tell me if he wants to run a campaign of it, because it may be enough to just get me to dive back into doing RPGs. I've kind of veered away from RPGs because they take so much time and I need to play so many games for this channel, so I like being able to use my time for that instead, but oh man, it's so good. And you can get the supplementary material with 10 new cases, and it's called Nephews in Peril. Where you can get additional backstory quests and stuff, and just sounds so exceptional. And it's cheaper than Blade Runner, $20 US for the PDF, for the print and play of all the basic rules and the basic core book. Or $35 for a printed copy, $65 for both printed copies. The fact that this exists and is doing so well makes me incredibly happy, and I think everyone has to check it out. So please do. That finishes next Monday, May 30th at 11:59 p.m. Right before the witching hour. Meeple, we're going mystery solving. And finally this week, I mean, nothing can replicate the high that we've just been on, but we have a game called Anunnaki, Dawn of the Gods. And half of this design team is Simone Luciani, who was part of the Lorenzo Il Magnifico design team. There were 3 of them over there. And I'm a big fan of Lorenzo, and so I knew the name, and that makes me a little bit excited for this game. And you're basically playing as a otherworldly race who appears to us mere mortals as gods. And your goal is to navigate your own solar system and eventually conquer the new planet Gaia that's been discovered that, coincidentally, everybody else has also discovered and are racing towards because you've run out of resources on your own planet. And it's time to move to other people's planets and steal their resources, their last dwindling resources, before they can. So this is billed as a 4x Euro. And what that means is there's a lot of ways to earn points. Most points at the end of the game wins, and mostly you're going to win points by either winning battles or by getting income from your settlements. And there are other ways to do it too. You win it by summoning your gods, or specific gods. You can fulfill commercial packs. And this is our number 2 game on this list this week that kind of reminds me a bit of Lords of Hellas, which, even though there are 4 win conditions in Lords of Hellas, it feels fairly battle-centric to me, and this feels similarly battle-centric in terms of how you control the areas. Because it does lean into the 4X genre with exploiting the land and building your settlements, but for me it leans more towards that battle because whenever you use a resource, it's gone. It's not like these places can continually keep producing resources. You have to go out and actively conquer and seek out new lands to take things from. This is the second law of thermodynamics, the board game. When your resources are gone, they're gone, and everyone grows cold and dies. See? I told you this would be filled with sadness and despair. And the scoring here is a little bit like Tiny Epic Vikings as well. There's going to be these 4 tracks that are randomized that you can go up throughout the game, and then your points will be scored based upon these random criteria. They're not random, they're varying, these varying criteria. I'll admit, this rulebook is fairly heavy and wasn't the easiest to digest because there's a lot going on. But for the general overview points of what's interesting, your main actions are going to be determined by your own personal solar system, and you're going to move your pawn to an action space. But these action spaces are all shuffled up at the beginning of the game and randomly distributed. So every game you're going to have a different distribution of action spaces on your board, and that might turn you off. You may think, I want to choose the actions that I want to choose. I don't want it to be determined by this board. Or you may be interested because of that random element and solving a new optimization puzzle every time. And in addition, when you're moving this pawn between these spaces, you're putting little cubes down to show that you've gone through that pathway. And when you've surrounded, usually in a triangle, a specific pathway, you've done a circle, a loop of these actions, you then get to take the mana crystal that's in the middle, and those can be used for other things. And then when it gets to the sort of main board side of things, where you have your own planet that you are settling things on and other people can teleport to, and you have the main Gaia planet, basically there will be these sort of outposts that you have to surround, and you can surround it with multiple people, and you all sort of participate in the pillaging of the outpost and getting the resource. But you want to surround it yourself because then you'll get the most rewards, and so you're going to be pushing into other people's spaces and triggering battles in that space, and only one person can be left in the space so that you strategically get these area control placements. So those are the 2 main factors of the game. That solo board element feels slightly interesting to me, but also I can see how I would be frustrated by it. And then the standard area control aspect of it, that's what feels a bit like Lords of Hellas placement. Or maybe it's just because the minis look like they're going to be small, like Lords of Hellas. Anyway, this one's 79 euros or $108 Canadian, plus expensive shipping. The cheapest that you're going to pay is 18 to 20 if you live in places that usually get cheaper shipping. For me, it's 30 euros. So we're looking at over $150 Canadian for me. And this looks good. Like, it looks something that I would be interested in playing and trying out, but not for that price point. For me, if it was 60 to 70, I mean, that's a drastic cut. That's the sort of part where I'd be like, yeah, this is a great deal for all the stuff you're getting and potentially a cool game. I'll pull the trigger, right? I feel like something like this even though it says it plays in under 2 hours, and that's kind of what they're pushing. They're like, don't worry, it's 4X, but it's not very long. I think still, it's not the length that's going to put people off from the table. It's the density of choice of the types of actions that you can do may make it not get to the table as much as you might like. So those would be my concerns about that one. But there are some neat things in it. So if you're interested, check it out. The finish is May 31st at 6 a.m. And that's it. Hey, that's it for the week. We made it. So every week I do a pick for me and a pick for you. Pick for me is the thing that I'm the most interested in, and the pick for you is my recommendation, what I think would have the most vast appeal, or what I think you should get so that I can play it at your house instead. I was afraid of this week, honestly, because I backed 2 things last week. I did end up pulling the trigger on both Broken and Beautiful and the calendar. I wasn't sure about the calendar, and then I thought I'll make a reason to drive through so I won't have to pay the shipping, and then I can pay 22 bucks Canadian and it feels okay. And maybe there'll be a nice soul who's bringing it to Toronto, who goes to Cambridge and brings them all to Toronto for people to pick up. Because board gamers are awesome. But I was worried about this week because by backing 2 things, when I rarely back things, it just opens the floodgates a little bit. It makes it so much easier to say, okay, now you've backed a couple things. Well, these things look cool, and what about that? And what about that? And I can feel myself going down this slippery slope. So luckily, I have managed temptation. I don't think I will be backing anything this week, but I do have a pick for me and a pick for you. And the pick for me, I mean, it's obviously Brindlewood Bay. Obviously. The joy that concept brings for me, I don't care that it's not a board game. And there were some other things that were vying for it. I really didn't think that Brindlewood Bay would sneak in, but then I read through it and I thought this is just the best thing ever, tailored to all of my interests. As you know, I have a soft spot for these sorts of things. I don't know, I just think it looks so funny. It's so innovative. Murder, She Wrote is such a bomb show. Jessica Fletcher is the queen of all queens, let's be real. It's just so charming. It is such a charming world and system and an awesome thing to roleplay in, and so unique. So if you like RPGs at all, I don't know, well, you'll know whether or not it'll bring you as much joy as it does for me. But yeah, that is absolutely my pick for me. No question about it. My pick for you is going to be Brindlewood Bay. And then next week, I want to share a secret. My pick for you is Brindlewood Bay. No, I'm just kidding. My pick for you, it could be a few things. The contenders here are Imiki, Through Ice and Snow, and Tiny Epic Vikings. I think they all look cool, but obviously I have to give it to Tiny Epic Vikings just on value alone. And I think the denseness of that system is going to feel fun. I hope. It looks good, but it also looks like a great price point too. My only hesitation there is if you're thinking about just getting the retail and you're fine with the retail, because that extra $5 for those 6 shamans, that honestly doesn't make me want to do the draw, because I know that if I go for the retail option, I can probably get it in stores, versus if I go for the Kickstarter Deluxe option, well then it's not just $5, it is that extra shipping cost, right? So that would be my only hesitation there, is if you are thinking about it, think about it at retail as well and look into your local store and see if it's there. But the system itself looks very dynamic, and potentially the most dynamic I've seen from a Tiny Epic system. And that's, I think, perhaps why I'm the most interested in it, because it feels dynamic. It feels like with the drafting, it will be fairly variable, and you'll get that replay value out of it. And it feels like a big game in a small box, which is, I think, exactly their mandate. And like I said, for all the other Tiny Epics, I go, yeah, it looks okay. But this one, I think, actively looks like a decent game that you may want to pull out, even if you're not traveling. I think the key with Tiny Epic is that you kind of want to travel with them because they're so easy to take, right? If you don't have the space for a big game, you could travel with a little game. And so for me, if I'm ever at home, it feels almost like a waste to pull out a Tiny Epic game because I have all the bigger games, you know? So that's where I get this weird feeling with Tiny Epic, but this one feels like it might be worthwhile pulling out instead or in supplementation with others for a game night. And I think that is what makes me interested in recommending it as the pick for you. But again, check in on that retail, because probably retail is fine. There aren't really specific stretch goals or stuff. You're still going to get the quality of the wooden figures in the retail versions. They pack it in. As always, it's with a caveat. That's it for the week. Thanks so much for sticking around, sticking with me. I really enjoy hanging out. This was a fun week. I was worried because there was a ton of stuff at the front, which feels completely uninteresting to me. But then we got into some fun, good ones. I mean, you know, this smile on my face is from Brindlewood Bay, and Brindlewood Bay has made me see joy for the first time, I think, in my life. So yeah, let me know what you're backing this week and why it's Brindlewood Bay. And let me know what else you're excited for and why they'll never measure up to Brindlewood Bay. Or what's coming up. You know, I always like to hear that. I say it every time because I mean it every time. I do. I love hearing from you all in the comments, and yeah, you're all awesome. Appreciate you all. Once again, my name's Chris George, and I don't have a catchphrase. But you know, I have been told that there's always room at Room and Board. So come on in and get on board. I got so many catchphrase suggestions, I gotta start working through them. So see you in the next one.